Hi everyone, I'm Henrique, and today we're in another lab tours in Kotaja's lab. And here we have Samuli, and he's going to present us some cool things. So could you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi. My name is Samuli. I'm a first year PhD student here at the Kotaja Group.
Cool. And would you mind giving us a small lab tour here, and so we can discuss more things?
Sure thing.
Cool. Cool.
So here is one of our labs, which is this one is dedicated for Western blotting, and each of our lab is somehow specified to some specific technique, but usually you can work wherever you want, but this is the normal setup that we have in most of our labs.
Oh, interesting. And they are basically, so they're mostly for your like the people from your own group, or is it like for like shared use?
All the labs are shared between the four groups in our floor, and each of the four groups were kind of functioning as a big unit, and all of us are focused on the physiology.
Cool. So what exactly do you do in this lab? Like, because it seems very interesting.
Yeah, so this lab is dedicated for this method called Western blotting, which is basically a method used to identify proteins from a biological sample. So we're running the sample on a gel that separates the different proteins, and then we can recognize from there the separated proteins.
Wow. That's cool. I'm not contaminating anything here, right? No? No? Okay, good. Cool. So, could you tell me a bit about the research topic? What type of, let's say, questions you're trying to investigate in your research and in the group in general?
Yeah, so we're mostly interested in RNA regulation in male germ cells. So we're trying to understand the molecular mechanism behind sperm production, and we have kind of two real-life implications. First one is male infertility, which is a very growing problem, and we're trying to understand why it is growing and what we could do to solve it. And the other one is epigenetic inheritance of paternal environmental effects. So we're trying to understand how the father's environment and lifestyle might affect their future offspring.
Wow, that sounds very interesting and complex. So, could you tell us a bit how, let's say, how you came up like to do the research in this group? Like, how did you find this group? Like, if you had interest before, how was it?
Yeah, well, it all started in 2019 when I started my bachelor studies in biomedicine, and our PI Nora was giving a lecture on this epigenetic inheritance in our genomics course, and I really got fascinated by her presentation about the epigenetic inheritance, and I started thinking that should I or could I someday work with this subject, and then finally I got my courage to ask her if I could join the lab, and she was very happy to take a young, excited student with the group.
So, as you know, we all have the same DNAs in cells, but we actually have a process called regulation, and epigenetics is basically part of this regulation process, and it's truly interesting because it's basically what gives the whole complexity of everything we are, I guess, right?
Yeah, exactly. It kind of regulates how our genes are expressed.
Yeah, yeah, that's very cool. And yeah, so do you have like I don't know, a favorite equipment or like some very cool thing you'd like to show us?
Well, I think the coolest equipment that we have in our facility are our microscopes, which kind of our university is known for, that we have really high quality microscopic imaging facilities. So I would say that the microscopes are the coolest ones in here.
Okay, would you mind taking us there?
Sure, we can go and check our microscope.
Cool, let's go. Cool. So Samuli took the time to prepare a very cool demonstration. So can you please explain like what is this equipment and what are the cool things about it?
Yeah, so this is a confocal microscope, which I use mainly for imaging the mouse testis tissue.
Cool. And what do we see there? What is there?
Yeah, so here we have the cross section of a mouse testis tissue with the 100x magnification. So this is one cross section of a seminiferous tubule that is inside the testis, and here we have the epithelium of the seminiferous tubule with the male germ cells, developing male germ cells, so that the first cells are here close to the border of the epithelium, and then closer to the lumen we have the developing almost ready sperm cells.
Wow, interesting. And what are those like more, let's say, light dots and darker parts? What is this exactly?
Yeah, so now here we see the nuclei of the cells, so where the DNA is located in. So what we see as the brighter spots are the compacted DNA chromatin.
Wow, that's so interesting. That's so interesting. And this is a bright field, or is this fluorescence right now?
This is a fluorescence image, and here on the other channels we have other proteins that we have labeled with fluorescent labels. And here, for example, we have this one protein that we're very much interested in our lab, which is labeling this intracellular small structure called the chromatoid body, which is a ribonucleoprotein granule that the function of which we're trying to understand, and the importance of that for the spermatogenesis.
Wow, that's truly interesting. It's worth mentioning that Turku is one of the leading institutions in bioimaging. And yeah, that's very cool, because with these types of microscopes that analyze fluorescence, you can not only see the visible light, but you can also create custom labels for some specific data, and you can read this data through fluorescence imaging, and that's pretty cool, and that's literally what we are seeing. What do you think is the impact of your research in the world? Like, how do you see that, let's say, in a bigger context? You already mentioned a bit about, of course, the male fertility and let's say all this, let's say, growing problem. But do you see other, let's say, implications for what you're doing?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, the male infertility is a very growing problem, and infertility overall, as for example in Finland, the total fertility rate is already below the rate that is required for maintaining the population size. And the reasons for that are not completely known. About half of the male infertility cases, we don't know the reason behind that. So we're trying to understand what kind of reasons there might be to better diagnose the reasons behind, and thus better treat the male infertility.
Wow, wow. Yeah, I think that it's very cool that you have a research focused specifically on that. How do you interact, like, let's say, with the other lab members? Do you have, like, I don't know, weekly meetings? Do you collaborate with some people? Do you work mostly alone? Can you elaborate a bit?
Yeah, so we have this very tightly functioning group that we have weekly lab meetings, and we're doing. Each of us has our own projects, and we're responsible for our own stuff, but we're also collaborating a lot with each other and doing things together, and sharing results and sharing ideas together. So a combination of both individual and teamwork.
Wow, that's very nice. I think that when you're stuck in the middle of the research, the best thing is like to talk to someone and to actually have ideas on how to get out of that problem. That's very cool. And what about other research groups? Do you have any, let's say, external collaboration or even internal collaboration?
Yeah, we do a lot of collaborations with other specialists in both within the germ cell and fertility field, but of course also with other fields where we don't have expertise. So both national and international collaborations.
Okay, that sounds very interesting. What do you think about University of Turku in general, as a place of studying, as a place of doing research, and of Turku in general as a place to live? Are you from here?
Yeah, well, I'm originally from Kouvola, from the southeastern part of Finland, and I moved here in 2019 for the studies. And during these almost 6 years, I've become a huge fan of Turku. I really like the city, as it has everything I need and really compact. And what comes to the university and studying here, I think it's really nice that we have a lot of students. I think almost 1/4 of the whole population here are students, and also we have a lot of foreign students, so we have different cultures from all around the world. And the university, the campus is very compact also, and easily accessible. And then, for example, this imaging that you mentioned earlier is a big thing here at the University of Turku. So that's something that I'm really happy that I get to enjoy all these fancy equipment. For example, this confocal microscope, and then also several other microscopes that we have in another building very close by.
Yeah, we have here two big universities, University of Turku and Åbo Academy, and actually a lot of this, especially imaging facilities that are like very expensive equipment, are shared, and I think that's very important to progress towards, let's say, better science. Would you, let's say, recommend for master's students? Like, would you give any advice for them if they are like considering applying here, or if they, I don't know, are trying to choose to either come here or they have another offer? What would you say them? What would you tell?
Well, I would say that of course Turku is a very good option. For example, because we have these international master's degree programs which are in English, and I think we have a good variety of options where you can choose from. It's not that important what the exact topic of that master's degree program is. If that sounds interesting to you, you can of course apply and then continue to whatever you want after that.
Okay, well, that sounds very very valuable advice. And okay, just a last thing. In University of Turku, we are inspired by many things. So could you let's say finish the sentence? Get inspired by what? Get inspired by what?
Sperm, they're really cool.
Thank you a lot. Thanks a lot, and thank you for your attention. And see you soon.